Please. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Behave like people who know our continent has a future. Change the world. Don't let the world change us. We've heard the welcoming address from Honorable Benjamin Mkapa, and we've now heard the keynote speech from President Kagame. So I think we shall begin our discussion really as I get my input, and just to welcome on our panel as well His Excellency Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, former President of Somalia, and Secretary General Dr. Mukisa Kitui, Secretary General of UNCTAD. Gentlemen, let me start with the balance that we have achieved and the current state of play in our financing modality in Africa. What is your view on whether we have any balance at all and what our major challenges are? I will start with you, Your Excellency. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. As a beginning, much has been said by His Excellency President Kagame at the continental level, and the initiatives and the efforts that are going on at the continental level is good. And I'm sure today and tomorrow much will be said, but I would like to take one perspective which is not the conventional one. There is a lot of literature that discusses about financing, the bottlenecks, the challenges, the obstacles that exist, and the opportunities as well that Africa has, which is much, much greater than the challenges and the obstacles. But I would like to add one dimension, which is, well, much has been said that Africa is interlinked. No one country can be isolated. At the same time, Africa is not at the same level in terms of development, in terms of so many variables that contribute to the transformation factor. What I would like to say is emphasizing that link and connectivity. Maybe many African countries would have been categorized today as a developed world if the overall African continent's problems are not encompassing. The issue of trust, the issue of risk, the issue of so many other things that the other countries that are not African are, or other investment corporations are saying when they talk about Africa. I'm coming on the issue of the post-conflict and the fragile status or countries in the continent, which cannot be ignored. Because those countries, they have challenges, they have problems, and not only by themselves, but maybe they contribute to the challenges and the obstacles that are existing in other parts of the continent. Let me take one example. Maybe some people assume that sovereign, independent, separate countries, they have minimal link or affect each other, but I would like to say that assumption is questionable. In Somalia, for example, which has a difficult era at the moment and in the recent history, we have proofs and facts that the terrorist fighting going on in Nigeria, which is the western part of the continent, Boko Haram. There are facts that shows that elements within the Boko Haram has been trained in Al-Shabaab training camps inside Somalia. Right. And from there they traveled all the way to the west, from east to the west of the continent to create the problems that they are creating. So similarly, I don't say that the only problems we infect each other when it comes to the problem. We infect each other when it comes to the development as well. Because today Africa is contributing the other way around Somalia to solve its own problems. There are a lot of African boys and girls who lost their life in Somalia without having any other interest other than seeing a stable, functioning state in place in Somalia. So So I would have liked when we Africans discussing about the development, sustainable development, transformation, financing the everything, to include as a cross-cutting issue the realities that are existing in the post-conflict or in the fragile status. And as said, fragility does not mean always conflict. There are many countries that are not in conflict but still
are fragile.
Are fragile.
Thank you so much for
So
that.
that cross-cutting issue has to be considered when we're discussing these issues. Thank you.
And I think I will tap into, after we go into the panel for a bit, to President Obasanjo, former president of Nigeria, to give us his thoughts on that linkage, because that caravan from Somalia to northern Nigeria is indeed very real. Let me come to you now. And by the way, did anyone watch the BBC and see the story on Libya this morning? And just how fractured Libya continues to be, which continues to be another conversation we must have even as we look at sustainable development. Dr. Muhisa Kitui, looking at our current financing modality across Africa in general, what are your thoughts on the state of play and our greatest challenges that we need to sort out?
All right, thank you very much. First of all, the global picture. In our World Investment Report 2018, we show a number of characteristics that should inform our thinking about globally how we are financing our development. Number one, Africa's foreign direct investment in 2017 declined 21% from 2016. For the first time, illicit flows from Africa were more than a combination of ODI and FDI into Africa in 2017. Number two, the largest sources of greenfield investment capital in the world were China, Singapore, and Thailand. Which means, if you are looking for development financing globally, your traditional guess to the north and west is a waste of time. Number three, for Africa, the promise of Agenda 2030 and 2063 cannot be realized on the current level of financing unless you activate alternative sources of financing, which brings us to the domestic challenge. What has to be done? First of all, Africa must revive and strengthen development financial institutions. In this part of the world, we had the East African Development Bank, which is comatose, but it can be revived. And I think there's a need for new political will to resuscitate development financing, other than depending on other regions' development financial institutions to bail us out. Two, since domestic resource mobilization is the core area, attention has to go to a number of areas. Number one, taxation. Taxation basically is rent on resources and taxing trade. And what is required here is two things. The first one, we must strengthen the revenue authorities. Some of the leakages is because of weaknesses in institutions responsible for revenue collection. Secondly, we must look at strengthening the regime of trade, not just importing goods from East Asia, but building trade facilitation pari passu with investment facilitation to produce something to put into the global market. Right. Third, trade facilitation should not just be dealing with across-the-border issues. We must start talking about soft infrastructure. To me, one of the best examples is one of my most successful donations to the world as an organization, the automated system of customs management. Mm-hmm. In Afghanistan, after we established ASICUDA, in 7 years, customs revenue grew from $50 million to $1 billion. In DRC Congo, when I went to hand over the system, the Director General of Customs told me in 3 months they had collected what they have collected in the previous 2 years. 3 months ago, I was launching ASICUDA in Angola. The phenomenal gap in African resourcing is the financial leakage through poor institutional capacity of the revenue authorities. Mm-hmm. We should not wish that away. Another area President Kagame just mentioned, the challenge of transfer pricing and trade misinvoicing. You cannot wish away the leakage. If the leakage is larger than the inflow of FDI, we're playing political games to pretend that we can sustainably finance our activities. Together with the UNECE of Dr. Vera Songwe, we are undertaking an initiative on defining, estimating, and disseminating statistics on illicit flows from Africa. We must understand the morphology of the enemy we're dealing with if we are to find and model political and technical solutions to dealing with it. Finally, if we are talking about financing Africa's survival, we cannot wish away the critical role of the digital economy. Globally, last year, e-commerce reached 25.7 trillion US dollars. For the past 5 years, electronic commerce has been growing 4 times as fast as normal trade. Africa cannot be left behind. And you should be aware of the fact that the combined capitalization of electronic business in Africa and Latin America is 2% of global capitalization. So we must apply ourselves to this frontier, which is going to be increasingly important in availing electronic market visibility for African produce as a way of new revenue for development. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Very clear, very direct, and a way forward, a clear path for us. Thank you. Your Excellency, Benjamin Mkapa, I come to you now, and 2 things I want to just tap into. We are aware of these illicit flows. It's been happening for a long time. It looks like the situation, as we have been told, is getting worse, not better. Why do we not act on that? But my second question, in order to raise taxes, we have to have thriving businesses. Why is it so hard for African businesses to prosper and thrive when you find a lot of Western nations push their businesses forward, right? We in Africa struggle in spite of our governments very often. So can we address what is this imbalance? We know about these illicit flows. They seem to be getting worse. On the other hand, we are not building African Simba businesses or giant businesses that we can then, tax well and earn good revenue off. What are your thoughts on this, please, Mkapa? Thank you. And I will come to you, President Kagame, on the same 2 issues as well.
Those are tough questions you put to me. Why are the illicit transfers happening? My simple answer is that because the financial managers are part of the problem. They are part of the problem because they are facilitators of the illicit transfer, because they are benefiting from the process. There's no integrity, there's no surveillance, and there is no enforcement. That is the problem.
When you say financial managers, let's name the people where the buck stops.
The bankers are themselves involved. The tax authorities are themselves involved. The customs people are also involved. The other state institutions are totally lax. So when you have so many loopholes, things will pass through. That's what happens. I mean, let me ask you, there's trouble now, for instance, in your country about auditing the lifestyle of your leaders, right? Not only the political leaders, but economic leaders, bankers, teachers, you name it. Why is it very difficult to carry that out? Because very many believe that they are part of the problem and they can't solve it themselves. So that's what I mean by way of illustration. I'm not condemning your
No, absolutely, and it's important, yes.
I'm not condemning your life for it. The second question was?
My second question is building African businesses. How can we ensure that government is a facilitator for growth and development, not a hindrance, which happens in many of our spaces?
The problem is you must have a government that encourages initiative, innovation, and trade. But if you have government and members of government who are jealous of those who initiate, who innovate, who expand, then you won't have progress. You'll be an obstacle. Regulate it by all means, enforce it, and punish it when there are occasions. But don't be an obstacle. Allow the energies to come up and forth.
So we've come back to mindset.
It's a question of also of political philosophy and economic vision. If you don't embody those in facilitating investment and trade, domestically particularly, then you will have investors coming to take over your economies.
Right, which they are. President Kagame, please, your thoughts on those 2 issues. And I think we have heard from President Mkapa some of the issues. Please share more, and then your thoughts on how we can decisively deal with these things, please. The mic is just...
To decisively deal with such issues, I think I mentioned that it all comes down to politics. Is there political will in the whole structure of government? If there is on the side of government, normally it will encourage even in other sectors for that to develop. Even the private sector will be encouraged once there is this political will and there is that interaction and creation of that environment. So really what is happening is you talk of illicit transfers. Illicit transfers really happening because of illicit politics, if you will, or at least wrong politics, if the word doesn't apply. So if we correct that, then the rest will likely happen. You know, but it has continued being a mindset change process. Earlier I said something, I said maybe I'll have the opportunity to come back to that. I'll give you just quickly 2 examples. One, when you are talking about even where there is a road, a very good road, nothing actually happens. People prefer to use, yes, panya routes. Yes. It happens. We've seen it. We have our own experience here in Rwanda. We see across our borders in some parts, people preferring to go through the mountains and forests and avoid the road. What do you think is happening? I don't think these ordinary people are the ones making the mistake. They are avoiding something. So the leaders need to say, what are these people avoiding? Why don't we put it in place and have it going? The other is even our elite. Quickly, one time here in our own country, there's, in fact, during the time we were building these iconic structures and everywhere, I was coming from abroad on a mission, and I was going through our airport. So I met people I knew from government and together with the private sector, and I greeted them. I asked where they were going. They told me they are going to Dubai. So I said, what are you going to collect from there? They gave me a whole list of things, and because we were accelerating construction of this convention center, the airport, and so on and so forth, 60% of what they told me were things we have here. And these were engineers, they were, all kinds of professionals we have. So I said, why do you have to travel to Dubai to buy these things from Dubai that are here? They were not even, because they could say, yeah, still we can have them cheaper there, even if you add transport and so on and so forth. But that was not even the argument. The argument was, no, they thought they just had to collect them from Dubai. So, and I was saying to these people, I said, so I actually stopped them. Okay. Yes, so going.
You sourced locally?
We did. Okay. And some of those things I'm talking about, you couldn't get better ones from anywhere.
Can we give that a round of applause?
Yes.
That when we put our foot down, we can source locally, yes, and we can produce
absolutely.
Quality.
So I cancelled their trip. I said, no, you will go for the smaller part which you can't find here later, but now you go and look for these things. And that's what happened. Mm-hmm. So those small examples explain what is going wrong. There's something going wrong. We need to correct the structure of different aspects of the structures of our economy.
Right, but and that connects back to vocational training, to building excellence, to supporting excellence. Let me come back to you, Your Excellency, and the Somalia experience now. As the nation rebuilds, what for you is most exciting when it comes to financing? Things like Dahabshil happening and money coming from the diaspora, very exciting things happening. And what for you is worrying? Because again, we talk about a different kind of colonization and we see it. We feel the forces coming together. So highlight for us some of the things that are top of mind for you.
Yeah, we share many of those challenges that has been said, but it's true. It has been said recently that the illicit flow is much more than the ODA and the direct foreign investment together. Somalia, today, the basis of economic or financial is the mainly besides the export, mainly the diaspora, sending a lot of money back home. The same issue, the remittances that the Somali diaspora sending back home is much more than the aid that's given to Somalia. Somalia is one of the areas that a lot of aid has been provided, but even then, the remittance is much more than that. Plus, the Somalia exports a lot of things, livestock, other products, the Somalia exports. But I totally agree with President Kagame. It's all about the human being. The human capital. That's, money does not walk by itself and go from one bank to bank. It's people. It's people who makes it move from one place to another, from one country to another. So it comes back to the people again here. And one question is why the responsibility of the governments when it comes to money or finance has so many problems. And when it comes to the private sector, many of those problems are not there. Mm-hmm. There is no illicit in business, illicit in terms of legality, in terms of the laws of the country, but within the company, or no company allows his money to go.
Efficiency.
Yeah.
Right,
so it's all about our attitude, our mindset, our political agreements that we have, and maybe up to a certain extent, in many African countries, the model of state that we are using, I quote and question, in many countries, the way of life, the culture and the habits of that nation, and the political or the state model that they are taking, are they compatible? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because we all know in post-independent Africa, we just have copied without doing many of the necessary transformations that were. Up till now, there are so many African countries that the rules and the regulations that their central bank is using has direct relationship with the central bank of other countries.
Right.
So customizing our own systems is very important.
And we need to have the boldness and bravery to do that.
Yes. To say no when necessary.
Right. Dr. let me come to you now. You've given us a good pathway forward, but I want us to step back a little bit because we have all identified that this all starts with mindset, right? We have a lot of stakeholders in the financial sector with us here. I want you to teach us, point fingers at us, challenge us when it comes to how we have allowed our illicit flows to get where they are today. What is it we really need to say? We've heard some things already. What would you add? And why we have refused to grow our local economies and build our African companies? What would you say to the people in this room?
Well, the number of things. I'll talk a bit to what has been said, but before that, let me just ask you a direct question. Like President Kagame has mentioned, at the end of the day, the decision on fighting illicit flows is political. It's a political leadership. If you have a parasite state that lives off illicit gains at personal level, at the sacrifice of national income, there's something wrong that fundamentally cannot be resolved without a political decision. Mm-hmm. The second level is technical competence. I know an African country which has signed a rent agreement on minerals with a Chinese company. And relies on the Chinese company to tell them how much mineral they have taken out in order to assess how much rent has to be paid.
Right.
Now,
Right. We laugh, but it's happening.
Now, when you are doing it like that, and it's not a new country, it's not a country that is new in mining, it's a country that has been there for a long time. This is politically criminal for an African state to be doing this kind of thing. Third, just the technical capacity to do the right things. We have not invested enough in this. But there's one or two things that I wanted to mention in addition to that. First of all, it has been mentioned here, the importance of the diaspora. If we are now talking about mobilizing African resources, there has to be more active state engagement in ensuring the integrity of investments for the diasporans who are trying to remit money home. Secondly, we just published a report on economic impact of African migrants in Africa. The biggest challenge is the high cost of remittance, that an African sending money from one African country to another pays more tax, more cost of transfer than other people elsewhere in the world, which means international companies, PayPal, World Remit, Express are making money off Africans with very modest remittances home. The governments of Africa must help facilitate cost-effective transfers within Africa. Under SDG Agenda 16.4, I think, there is a target of no cost of remittance above 4% of the value of the remittance. We must take active steps towards this. Another thing that I wanted to mention, 3 months ago I attended a meeting in Kampala, a summit of the East African community, and there was very cynical reaction to private-public partnerships by presidents, talking as if it's a conspiracy. I think it is necessary to embrace the reality that our own private sector has to be an important partner. The challenge is the integrity of the contracting. The Economic Commission for Europe has done a typology of contracts, how to make bankable public infrastructure projects for PPP. Instead of strengthening our ability to audit projects, we are being cynical, which takes away a critical player in the financing of our development activity. I think I just wanted to mention this as an important component.
Thank you so much for that. I'm coming to the floor in just a moment. We hope to take about 3 or 4 contributions. We don't necessarily just want questions. We want to hear your perspective and get your recommendations on the way forward. But before I do that, I really... Yes. Oh, please go ahead, please.
I forgot is the informal sector.
Right.
We have not mentioned it here. You know, many countries have made conditions so difficult that domestic business is almost criminalized. So it refuses to have a fixed address. It remains informal. In Burkina Faso, 75% of enterprise is informal sector. 75% of enterprise. In our countries, we tell a private informal sector, we want to register them so that they pay tax. We don't tell them we want to register them so as to avail services.
And support their growth.
So you make small enterprises grow horizontally to create a multiplicity of small enterprises for fear of the pain of becoming formal. I think the political decision to facilitate small enterprise is phenomenal in how much revenue it can generate for the state.
In fact, for African countries, can we just accept that informal is the normal? Instead of treating informal as if it's this dirty sector, it is actually the backbone of many of our economies, and these are the people honestly sweating. And if we first start with a respect for what they do and saying, we understand you work hard and you carry the burden of these economies, give them the respect and start there, because we tend to treat informal like it's this dirty sector, but we just want to tax them, and that's...
You must have a program of formalization of the informal sector. Disabuse them of the notion that you want them to formalize because you want their taxes. No. Educate them that by formalization, they have access to more capital. Yes, a recognition in law, and no one can divest them of any of their properties.
Yes.
But anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted.
It's the same point, President, I wanted to make, that we need to facilitate them to formalize their business. We just don't push them so they become or remain informal. So it's the point.
Thank you. And to formalize, we need to educate civil servants to approach them in such a way that it's non-antagonistic, it's not patronizing, it's together we move forward. And this is a whole process. But I love that we are on this tangent. I want us on the panel to take this opportunity to speak directly to the stakeholders in this room. So to the former presidents, to the president, to Daktari, we will finish on time, don't worry, don't worry. Who would you want to speak to in this room? Who do you want to really rise up to an occasion? What is bothering you right now, and what do they need to do when we're talking about transformation for sustainable development and financing? And I will start with you, please, Honorable Mkapa.
Me?
Yes, nobody? Even the media, no? Nobody you want to?
I will have closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, thank you. President Kagame, looking at the stakeholders in this room, who do you challenge and who do you want to rise to the occasion?
Well, all of them, I guess they, I guess they were listening when you were discussing these things. I think they need to just take note of it and do things for real, and so that we stop the cycle of repeating ourselves. We seem to know everything that needs to be done, or what the problem is and what the possible solutions are. We just need to get going, each one contributing their part, and we do what we need to do.
Thank you, everyone. Let's just do it. Your Excellency Mohammed, who would you like to speak to in this room?
Well, I would have said the media people.
Okay.
It's very important to pass the message, you know, the right message, particularly when we're talking issue of the mindset, the issue of the integrity, accountability. All this is a public, sort of public education, and I think media is the best place to disseminate those elements to the society at the age of the social media particularly, and not the recent phenomena of fake news and all this to be emphasized, but this substantial issue for our societies to know that these are the challenges, why we are not developing, why we are backward, why our politics are sometimes have problems, why, all these are issues that needs addressing to the society, and the media, I think they have to have their own role. Of course, they also have their own challenges. The point that's the issue of the media. The point that I was just raising my hand was, one, the issue of the informality of the economy, informality of the business, informality of all this is true in many countries, particularly the issue I was talking about, the fragile countries or post-conflict countries where the systems are still weak. One important is people, they want to do business. As President said now, people going through the jungle, they are not bad people, but there are circumstances that compel them to do that. So the informality itself, there are circumstances that compels people to do the informal thing. That's one. Number one. The other thing is maybe one of these problems might be solved with the continental free trade area that's undergoing now, because many African countries, they have a challenge of compatibility with the standards set in the West. We cannot compete many of the standards that has been set in the issue. Regulatory, quality, so many other issues that exist. The latest point that I would like to add is that the issue of the remittances that I was saying now, it's a lifeline for Somalia. It facing a very serious challenge of issue of compatibility. The end user, who is he? And who is the end user? An old grandmother who is living in a very remote village is sent $100 from Minnesota, London, Stockholm, wherever. And then the person is asked, who is the end user? What is the identity? And this, and 80 years old who's living far away in the mountains or in the jungle, how can? So many of banks and many of countries, they stopped the remittance now because we don't know the end user.
So again, set our own system.
So by having our own system at continental level, by trading among us, while the banana I'm sending to Europe has certain standards, but the banana I may send some other countries in North Africa, for example, might not have that type of standards.
Although we don't want to lose standards, but
we don't want to lose the standards,
right.
but our own ones.
Right.
Our own ones with our own conditions and our own realities.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Muhisa Kitui, I'd like to do this. Who do you want to speak to in this?
I would like to speak to my generation of African public intellectuals, public officers, heads of international institutions, government officers, and political leaders. When we grew up, we were structured to think about development as an engagement with the industrialized North. that we look to them by certain agreed norms of what macroeconomic development should be to see how they can help us to grow. Today, we are living in a very hostile environment with the rising voices of protectionism, with some leaders calling our continent with very unpleasant names, with shortening global production networks because of technology enabling them to conquer the challenge of labor, redomesticating textile production in Georgia, for example, meaning even the projected markets for our export are under threat. Project sources of development finance are drying up. We have to unlearn what we learned and learn new realities about how we are going to drive development in Africa. We have a collective responsibility to see how to optimize domestic resources, how to separate and criminalize personal appetites that exceed responsibility for high office, demonstrate that we can learn to stigmatize political thieves. I mean, it is this simple. And I think collectively, we can unlock the potential, which if we fail, is going to create a major crisis because of an army of unemployed, educated African youth.
Right. Unlearn and relearn. I'm coming to the floor now. We want to take maybe 3 comments, 4 if we can. We have a mic here. Can I see the hands, please? Yes, gentlemen. Thank you. I see you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mohammed Chambers. I'm the Special Representative of UN Secretary General for West Africa and Sahel. And I just wanted to take up on the point you made about Libya and the documentary that you saw. The immediate consequences are in the Sahel in particular. And it's a very sad story we see there of growing instability, violent extremism. But we need also to have a positive story out of the Sahel and look at the opportunities and not just harp on the very, frankly, disturbing security situation there. And in that context, under the leadership of our sister, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, mobilizing the UN system, Vera, and all of us, and working closely with the African Union. We have been working on a support plan for the Sahel, which emphasizes on the opportunities which are there. I mean, for instance, renewable energy, the solar possibilities are enormous, which if they are tapped and harnessed, working with private sector, etc., can indeed enable a lot of transformation of agricultural produce there also, which is there. We have the River Niger, which has for centuries supported civilizations. So all of these are there. We need to look at these options and possibilities. So here, I'm speaking to the private sector, to all of us heads of institutions. Let us endeavor to change the narrative there and give hope to the young people, the teeming young people of the Sahel, so that they don't become just victims of extremist ideology, but see that there are some real possibilities there for transformation. And again, I mean, the sources of Sahel is one of the regions with a huge diaspora, particularly in Europe. And if we can do something about reducing costs of remittances, that could be a huge source of funding for many of the projects that are doable there.
Thank you for that. Just before you sit down, I just want to ask a question, very short answer. Right now, who do you think is best placed and most likely to leverage the opportunities in the Sahel region? Is it going to be Africa or is it going to come from outside of Africa? Right now, what do you think?
The countries themselves, working through regional organizations such as the ECOWAS, the UMOA, LCBC, who have some projects in that direction. But the countries themselves, through their national development plans, taking advantage of sustainable development goals.
Great.
So the whole plan is how do we really accelerate implementation of the sustainable development goals, emphasizing on role of private sector, renewable energy, and some of the potentials
Thank
of
you
the
very
Sahel.
much. Thank you very much for that. Gentlemen, just on the row in front, and then we'll go to the lady on this side. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Abdullah Jane. I am Executive Director of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, but in my prior life, I was Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa. I just want to emphasize one or two things that President Kagame said. He said we are in a cycle of repeating ourselves. He talked about lack of political will, and this is true. I take the example of my friend Dr. Kitui telling us $1 billion of Asikuda from Afghanistan. I was res rep in Niger 23 years ago. We introduced Asikuda. And it's not only Niger, all over. Nothing is happening. The customs are not picking it up. They go there, so it's lack of political will, it's a lack of commitment, it's a lack of really moving on the agenda we set ourselves. There's a lot of talk here on illicit flows, and I'm sure that, we will listen to Dr. Song will eventually tell us. We started this, we did this study 7 years ago. We started it. And then you have a very credible study from a very credible former President, Thabo Mbeki. It is on the table. AU has adopted it. What we are saying is move on, take action on these things. Really, instead of really sitting, as you said, the words don't put porridge on the table. If there's no political will to move the agenda that we set ourselves, where we have concrete evidence to do things, we will have several other meetings and nothing will happen. That's what we want to put on the table. And we feel that African Leadership Forum is one of those instances where we are talking truth to ourselves, and we continue to talk truth to ourselves, and that is what we should do if we want to move this continent forward and transform it. Thank you.
Before you sit down,
Yeah.
lack of political will. We have democratic systems in many of our countries. The people will decide most of the time. That is the case. How do we fix this problem? I see President Chisano and President Obasanjo want to speak as well. So as soon as you're done, please pass the mic forward. Thank you.
Yeah, what was your question to me, you said?
How do we fix this lack of political will? You can actually pass the mic forward.
No, like I will let them say, if you ask me.
Yes.
We just have good leadership, accountable leadership, and you want to see an example, come to Rwanda. And I don't have, he doesn't pay me, President Kagame, but I'm telling you, where there's commitment, where there's leadership, where we know the problem. You talk of audit of lifestyles. Mm-hmm. When we go to a country where the biggest house that has been built is built by the former head of customs, it is scandalous.
Thank you.
And nothing happens.
Thank you. Thank you. Please pass the mic forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
thank you.
I want to be the first because I want to speak about him.
Okay.
I want to speak about President Obasanjo and say, well, he wrote a book, and it was about the new partnership for Africa. It was himself, it was Mbeki, it was Bouteflika. Don't you think, President, that we are talking the very same things which you talk about those days? Is it not time to stop talking and act? And then, so we have NEPAD. NEPAD solves all these problems. President Kagame is in power. We are no longer there. Why you people who are in power are not implementing NEPAD? And I want to disagree a little bit with my friend there. from the UNCTAD, that in our generation, we did not really grow with that culture of dependency. We were fighting against dependency. Nkapa can testify what was the thinking of Mwalimu Nyerere about independence, what was the thinking of Samora Machel about independence. We're fighting against colonialism in all its forms. And President Machel used to say, we have to fight against our mental colonization.
Yes, yes.
And so we wanted independence and to live in an interdependent world. But I think that some of us have forgotten that we have enemies who do not want us to be independent because they want to continue living out of our resources. And we did not find yet the way of utilizing our resources on benefit of our own people. There are lots of things to be said there. So what I can say is that that culture of fighting for independence was there, but our enemies became stronger than us. And through IMF, they took us to deviate a lot of our intentions and many other tricks which they have played. And today they're holding their heads and say, oh, we, after all, were wrong. But they will not live the way while we don't agree among ourselves on action.
Thank you, thank you. Can I just say, before you come in, President Obasanjo, the independence generation was an independence generation. This is a slightly different generation, and I think the one that followed, we got mentally colonized more and more as the years went by, and that is what we have to unlearn and relearn. Please, President.
Excuse me, let me say just one thing, if I may. These enemies of ours did not get stronger than we are. We got weaker than they are. Because we never got strong at all. And in fact, there is a problem, the problem of talking, the problem of analyzing problems and getting the analysis right and not acting is something that has been passed from one generation to another. We are culpable, all of us, from the beginning up to the present. Because what Samora Machel was saying was right. And he knew it. He knew that we can only become independent, not at the mercy of these people who are not letting us free. But so we knew there was a struggle to be carried out. And the struggle is not something that comes through prayer or just allowing the other one who is actually oppressing you to decide whether he lets go or not, right? So the story of talking about so much that is right and not behaving the way we should behave to do the things we ought to is something that has been passed on from one generation to another until this present day. So we need to find a cut-off point and say enough is enough.
Right.
Absolutely.
We need to act. President Obasanjo, how do we start to act? Tell us, teach us. From an action man himself. Yes, sir.
Well, the problem of Africa, we cannot blame it on anybody outside Africa. The problem of Africa must be blamed on us. And please, we can get together like this and interminably, and we can talk, and we will not move unless we act together. Now, let's go not too far away. What we achieved in decolonization should not be underrated, including bringing down apartheid. But we were able to do that because we worked together. Julius Nyerere, Kaunda, Machel, and we in Nigeria, we then look for people outside Africa who will be with us. Jimmy Carter, Jim Callahan, when they were ready to go with us, and we carried them along with us. And that was how we were able to get what we got when we got it. Now, I believe that, and I was saying this morning, that maybe when we finish here tomorrow, we should also let Africa Leadership Forum have some action. Take the illicit transfer report. We were told that no action has been taken on the recommendations of that report. Let us take 2 or 3 aspects of the recommendation and get our leaders, if they are the one to take action, to press them, to pressurize them, to make them take action. And wherever we have taken action, we have seen the difference. We talk about our colonizers, our so-called development partners, and we say they are our enemies. They are not our enemies. They love themselves more than they love us. Pure and simple. And until we love ourselves as we should love ourselves and work together, we will see enemy outside. And we, in fact, are our own enemy inside. Now, that is the truth. Now, I've told this story before. A good friend of mine is late Chancellor of Western Germany, Helmut Schmidt. Anytime we sat down and we drink and all that, we will talk. And one day I look at him and I said, Helmut, you people are not kind to us. He said, Olu, what do you mean by we people are not kind to you? Which people are you talking about? I said, you people from Europe, you are not kind to us. He said, how do you want us to be kind to you? I said, look at the stock the odds are stacked against us. He said, in what? I said, in economic matters. He said, look, we did not create capitalism for you. We created it for ourselves. And he said to me, give me 3 reasons why I should not buy your cocoa for $100. Bring it to Europe, turn it to chocolate, and sell it to you for $1,000. I said, that would be unfair. I said, but even for common humanity, shouldn't you be fair to us? He said, go and show me in your economics book where common humanity is a factor of production. Now, he was telling me that honestly and sincerely. Now, he won't say it outside. But if we do not know that, and we are just learning that now, that there is enmity out there, enmity has always been there. It's because we don't know it. And because we don't know it, we are wallowing in poverty. We are wallowing in ignorance. And we see those who will cheat us as those who will help us. When we see things for what it should be, that we should be the architect of our own fortune, And we have to work together. And if we do not work together and we are working separately, we will drown piecemeal. If we work together, we will swim together. Now let me talk about informal sector. Now, what is there for informal sector? When you say you want to organize them to do what? So my mother was in the informal sector, and that's how he raised money to send me to school. Now, if you go to him, you want to organize her to do what? You will buy what he wants to buy? You will give her money? You will improve her market? What are you organizing her for? She will be suspicious. These officials who say they want to organize us, now there's something else they want. And what do they want? Now, that is true. What do you want to organize them for? The first thing their mind will go to is you want to tax them.
Yes, it is.
Now, if you want to tax them, they will not make you organize them. They will go through that route that President Kagame talked about.
Yes, the
because
Panya
if
route.
they go through the main road, you will tax them. You will say you are organizing them. They only need to know that you are going to help them. If they know that you are going to help them, they will make themselves available. But the most important thing, we can talk, but let's talk more action.
Thank you so much. President Obasanjo, let's give him a warm round of applause. I will take the lady on that row and then come forward to the front row. Yes, we need a lady. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good morning, with all protocol observed. My name is Sibongile Sambo from South Africa. I run an aviation company providing private jets and helicopters and a petroleum business. Thank you for this opportunity. My input to this discussion is that let's become very practical in our approach. In Africa, we are very good in developing policies for enterprise development, for supplier development, innovation, this and that. But what are we doing practically to make sure that the innovation that we produce become practical and is consumed in Africa? We need to support our local businesses. We need to support businesses that are operated by women and youth especially. Not because we are women and youth, but because we can deliver. We are intelligent, we've got products, and we've got services that we can deliver.
Excellent.
And that enterprise and supplier development, it should have a structured approach. I am glad that Honorable Paul Kagame mentioned that he stopped purchasing in Dubai and promoted local business. That's what we need to do in Africa. If a young person comes through with a business, don't tell us that we don't have collateral or experience, but give us an opportunity, mentor us, hold our hand, and give us the finance. I think the key issue here is financing. Finance those opportunities. The other thing that I would like to talk about, which is a very key, it's a bone of contention, it's an issue of corruption. Corruption has been very toxic. We all know about it. But then how can we kill that toxication? How do we kill it? Because if one becomes corrupt, it's a two-way process. Others will say the politicians are corrupt, and others will say the business person is corrupt. But it's a two-way thing. Somebody has to initiate the corruption, somebody gives, and somebody takes. So business and political is all involved in the corruption. Mm-hmm. Let's make sure that we cut that. And then finally, let's talk about the multinationals. The multinationals, they come into our countries, they look for opportunities, they look for local businesses to partner with, but the first thing they will ask you, who are you connected with? We don't want that. Mm-hmm. We want to do business that is very clean, business that is profitable, and business that is sustainable. Thank you very much.
Very much for that. Thank you. And our final comment right here at the front, please. If we bring the mic forward. Thank you.
My name is Ionov Aga. I work with the World Trade Organization. I just wanted to add one voice to something that I think is missing in this conversation. We talk about political will and commitment and making things happen. I think many of us forget that all our political leaders cannot deliver if they don't have the right civil service. The issue of bureaucracy in Africa, a lot of which was wiped away in the 1980s during the structural adjustment programs. Today, in many of our countries, our leaders do not see appointments in certain positions on the basis of fit in ideology. If you have an economics minister, a trade minister, who ideologically does not fit what you want, or your foreign affairs minister who does not ideologically fit what you want, you are not going to get it. If you don't have the civil servants with the right skills, we can discuss everything in this room, but if you go back home, you need a good civil servant that will translate this into a program that you can implement. So I think in taking this conversation forward, we need to begin to see back how have we treated the civil service in our countries. Are they still strong? Do they have the technical expertise to support? What about the retirement and turnover? Because some of our governments, people come in and within every change of government, civil servants go. Right. So the institutional knowledge is not even there. So I think this is an element that you may have to factor in if we want to do less of talking and more of action.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. What rich thoughts and perspectives have come in. I will come back to the panel and I will start with closing remarks, but feel free to tap into some of the conversations you've heard from the floor as well. Dr. Hari, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Just one remark on informal sector. 15 years ago, I was the trade minister of Kenya. Yes. And we negotiated the customs union for East Africa. And since then, I've been part of our eminent person team which sat around borders in Gatuna, in Tororo, in Malaba, and in Namanga. An Indian from Nairobi with a 40-foot container drives through and takes merchandise to Uganda or to Rwanda. It's called regional trade. A woman at the border between Uganda and Kenya with 20 kilograms of maize trying to sell on the other side of the border is called a smuggler. And it is still the case today. The rules are made for the convenience of big business. The small-scale border communities, whether you're talking about Gatuna or Namanga, are not seen as part of the equation of regional trade. They are smugglers. They are an inconvenience. I am not asking for anybody to organize informal sector. I am saying they are the main drivers of our enterprise. Give them an address so that they receive electricity. Give them the physical convenience and security so that they can absorb technology and innovate their production processes. The main thing I want to say to this meeting is that I thank Honorable Benjamin Mkapa and the Uongozi Institute and the leaders who have helped us to convene here, and His Excellency Paul Kagame for hosting us, for always being there as a leader for Africa. But I want to reinstate a main message. The global dynamics are such that every region of the world will have to dig inside itself to find the resourcefulness to adjust, to grow. Nobody's going to grow Africa other than Africans. The rest of the world is there, but increasingly, we must start looking to new areas. Today, it is easier and realistic to look to FDI flow from Thailand than from England, and let our gaze also start shaping that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Very powerful. The rules are made for big business. Let's rethink that. Thank you for your comments. Let me come to, please, Your Excellency Mohammed, your final comments as we wind up.
Thank you very much. As he rightly said, Professor, is this the small business that does many of the good things that we have today, whether that's technological development or whether that's I want to take one case example that happened in Somalia. In one of the years, recent years, Somalia has exported 5 million heads of livestock, goats, cattle, camel, life. And this has been done by the business people. The government has no much to do with it except certain limited facilitation that it's made. Now, these enterprising or entrepreneurs, how effective they are. Imagine now, I'm coming back to the issue of the financing. Imagine now these young boys and girls who did this, if they had the access to financing and make abattoirs, and then as a result build meat factories, leather factories for 5 million heads, how much employment will be created, right. How much income for the government will be created. So accessibility of the finance is very important, and the government has to advocate and lead to facilitate the easiest way that financing opportunity can be given to those small traders and business people.
And just off the back of that comment, can I just say that we cannot continue with the banks and the numbers that we are currently dealing with. It's not affordable and loans are not accessible. We cannot get the funds. So for these young people, it's just impossible. And if somebody does not disrupt that space and innovate for financial services, we are going to be in trouble. President Paul Kagame, please, your final remarks.
Yeah. You know, here in our country have a proverb, which I'm sure may be in other African countries. Those who keep cattle, they say the cattle will not go for green pasture to graze so distant from home before they consume what is around the home. So that means really we need to sort ourselves first. I want to marry that with what we have all been asked in different circumstances. When the new administration in America was coming to being, we were asked, what does the new administration have for you? What does the new president have for you? Meaning Africans. But before we answered, I think the new administration was answering that question. They were saying, America first. So the indication was, they're really not there for you. No. And maybe they shouldn't be there for you. You should be there for yourself, first and foremost. So my answer to that all the time was, because they would even cynically, which also demanded a cynical answer, they would say, well, but this new president doesn't even know where Rwanda is or where Africa is. I thought it was a good thing. Yes. My answer was, actually it is a good thing that he doesn't know where we are or he doesn't know where Africa is. Because that is maybe going to put pressure on us to understand that we are there for ourselves too. Right. We can't keep living with the understanding that somebody is there for us, that somebody is there to take care of us, that somebody there is there to provide for us. And this does not preclude partnership, does not preclude working with others. But we really have to start by being there for ourselves. And then from there, we work with others. Absolutely. So what we are trying to answer in all our discussions, I think, is this one. When does Africa stand for being there for itself? When does even every country, as we work together, which former President Obasanjo was saying, we must work together. But what do you bring in working together with the other? you have to bring something. Somebody else has got to bring something. And we've got to bring this continent to stand strongly together, but by bringing something that makes it stand firmly and strong as it should be. So I think at the heart of this discussion is that point.
We are saying Africa first. Can we coin that? When does Africa put Africa first? When do we stop giving the begging bowl and put something on the table? Because we all have something to put on the table. And that reminds me of another proverb. I shared it just this week at another event. You cannot fill your stomach by picking another person's teeth. You know? So we continue to learn. Our final remarks for this session this morning, our closing remarks, I hand over to you, Your Excellency Mkapa, for those.
I don't know where to start. There's been so much scope by way of participation. But I want to underline what President Kagame has said. No one else is going to develop us. We are going to have to develop ourselves. This dependence on some American president or commissioner of the European Union to transform or to help us determine the path and the limits and the goals of our transformation is nonsense. But we must get this out of our mind. And I get very disturbed when, because I have a journalist background, I get very disturbed when I hear leaders in Africa saying, fortune is coming on us because the Chinese are here. Fortune is coming on us because the Americans are here. This is nonsense. I'm sorry to be so crude, but that's what I want to say. We will develop ourselves or will not develop. We'll develop ourselves, increase our equality, increase our worth on the world stage ourselves, and that way earn the respect of those others. Cooperation, as the president was saying, we must learn to work together. Africans must realize, you can't say this country, it is because it is by itself. No, I am because we are. Otherwise, we won't get any place. But other things I don't want to address. I want to address the informal sector as a good example. We are not formalizing them for tax purposes. We are formalizing them as the engine of economic and social transformation. First, recognition in the state to allow for their inclusivity in formulating and so on. They will feel that they are part of this state. So first, inclusivity. Secondly, to recognize that they are an important part of the economic framework. Three, that it is to their benefit because you are making arrangements for them to access capital. You are making it for them, you are making it possible for governments to organize their markets for them, both internally and externally. You are making it possible for them to establish partnerships among themselves. And certainly you are making it possible to be an instrument of regional cooperation. All those things center on the development of these units called informal. Without undertaking that work, you leave them in total poverty. Really, we must rethink. It's not just a question of taxation. No. It is, in Swahili we say, uwezeshaji. You are enabling them to be good, productive citizens, not only of their countries, but of the region. This for me was very clear. Well, I have here who was my major ideologue, Ambassador Sefue. He knows what we did as a government to try to formalize the informal sector. We had a whole institution in government whose task was to help the formalization of the informal sector. It helped them. It helped them. And he will tell you what the problems are. But this brings me to the last point. We have transitions of government in African countries, sometimes after 10 years, sometimes after 5 years. But one of the problems you find is that when a new government comes, it thinks that all that was done by the previous government is no good. They must start afresh. It's impossible. So if you have no element of continuity at all, you have problems, non-development, non-transformation. Sometimes you even take the transformation process backward. Exactly. You know, anyway, one of our leaders told us in Tanzania, he said in Swahili, kila zama na kitabu chake. Every government has its own book, you know? But that does not mean that the previous book has no relevance to the book that you are writing now. Right. This has to be stressed. I have spoken too much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A round of applause. And maybe just to emphasize with informal what we have been told by His Excellency Mkapa, it's for recognition, inclusivity, making them part of the economic framework, they can access capital. But can I also add, because we have some key stakeholders in this room, how do we give them preferential access to procurement within government? Government is one of the biggest, one of the biggest markets for many of our economies. And so how do we do that? That's another incentive for them to come into the light. Thank you so much for your participation. Can we give a big round of applause to everybody who has shared and spoken? We are now going to break for lunch, and I will hand over to Regis. Regis, could I please ask you to come forward to give us directions on the way forward? And I will just leave us all, as we leave this room, we're going to have many technical discussions, but clearly what we've all said is it comes back to emancipating our minds. And so let's all play a role. Thank you very much.